And we're coming to you live for the Built for Tough studio. Boomer Esiason, Greg Giannotti. It's Boomer and Gio on the Fan, simulcast across the country on CBS Sports Network and wherever you are on the free Odyssey app. Good Wednesday morning. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody that celebrates this fake holiday and suck money right out of us. And if you don't do anything about it, you're in the doghouse. There's nothing really good that comes out of Valentine's Day because if you do something nice, it's expected. If you don't do something, then you get yelled at. But anyway, have a happy Valentine's Day. You walked in, you looked at me, and you said, "These are the dog days of winter, Biggs. These are the dog days of winter," and they certainly are, but they're never the dog days on Boomer and Gio because we got 4 hours for you that'll keep you laughing and happy, hopefully, in this frigid February in New York. Good morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Jay. I'm doing great, and a lot of people are still talking about, the Super Bowl, all the different variations of what had happened and what would have happened had San Francisco scored a touchdown in overtime. The interesting thing, when you think about San Francisco, they probably should have won the game. I mean, they had a muff punt.
Muff.
Think about that.
What are you looking for,
right?
A muff?
That's exactly right. And Brock Purdy missed a wide-open Deebo Samuel at the back of the end zone. You had just so many, weird little things. Missed extra point that really created all these different scenarios for Kansas City to come back and win. And probably the biggest discussion point was overtime and how it impacted the game and how it's different now than it ever had been before. And I was talking to my buddy Frank Reich, who was one of the guys that was the principal of putting together the new overtime rule.
That's right.
In the playoffs and how it works. And now Kansas City said had San Francisco scored a touchdown and Kansas City came back and scored a touchdown, that they were going to go for two regardless, that they were going to lay it on the line, a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Either lost or won by an attempted 2-point try. Think about that.
Yeah.
However, if they didn't do that and they ended up kicking a field goal, an extra point to tie the game, then, Kyle Shanahan's thought process worked out right. They would have gotten the ball third and then kicking a field goal in that situation, they would have won the game. But if they miss, let's just say they don't. Let's say they have to punt, and then let's say Kansas City has to punt.
Yeah.
There's no ending until somebody scores.
Yeah.
So the game clock doesn't mean anything. The down clock does, of course, and maybe they would have changed sides, I guess, had they flipped into a second overtime. But there's so many discussion points around it, and who did the right thing, who did the wrong thing. And really, what it ultimately comes down to? It ultimately comes down to who are you playing against and what do you think how the game is being played. So if it's one of these 44-44, Buffalo Bill or Cincinnati Bengal, Kansas City Chief game, you're going to play the game a little bit differently because it's going to be more wide open, more offense.
Perfect example is the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes classic divisional game where they're going up and down the field and scoring within 13 seconds. That type of game,
right?
That goes into overtime.
So maybe that's the game that you take the ball first.
Yeah, and just keep the momentum going, go down there and score and put the pressure on them.
But this game happened to be it was a defensive game.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes was not going to lose it, but if it's a defensive game, it's a completely different story. And think about had Kyle Shanahan said, okay, we're going to put, Kansas City's offense out there first, and they go down and they settle for a field goal. Now you're in a situation where a touchdown wins it for you. But then again, it's you have a second-year quarterback who played reasonably well in the Super Bowl. I would suggest, but you're putting an awful lot of pressure on him. An awful lot of pressure on him. And I kind of think that, when I really think about it, there's no real reason. There's only like a 5% reason that you would not defer in that particular situation. And the reason on Sunday night was not one of those reasons why you would defer and then, take the ball on offense to start overtime. He made the wrong decision.
Yeah, and he could talk about the analytics all he wants. There's been really no examples of this particular situation out there. So it's only hypotheticals on how it could work and what type of game it is. And I think that anybody that's watching the game and then breaks it down afterwards comes up with that Same conclusion. Now, I still think that the game was won by the Kansas City Chiefs because they had the best quarterback and the head coach that was not going to screw those things up.
And they blocked an extra point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all of those things. So I don't necessarily feel like this game was blown like the Falcons blew the game against the Patriots. And I do agree that the 49ers had a real chance to win, should have won. I'm not sure if I can go that far because we both ended up picking the Kansas City Chiefs in a close game for all the reasons that ended up coming up during the game. Better coaching, better quarterback,
but
defense coming up in the biggest spots. Every one of those things happened.
Yeah, you kind of don't expect a muff punt, though, to give Kansas City great field position, and then on the next play, it's a touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the play. If there is a play in this game that, turned it around, that would be the play. And then if you're Steve Wilks, the defense coordinator for San Francisco, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's almost like you want to treat Patrick Mahomes like he's Lamar Jackson, the way that Steve Spagnuolo ran and the way that they rushed Lamar Jackson. But he's not Lamar because he'll stand in there and he'll throw the ball over somebody and take a hit. He just won't go running around. I mean, he does run around to a certain extent. But he hit Rashee Rice on a ball right across the middle where, they were coming right at him. And even Kyle Shanahan on the other side in the face of a couple blitzes before they kicked their last field goal, I mean, they had plays called on. They just couldn't execute them. And they were supposedly blitz beaters if your wide receiver can beat the guy that's covering him. And one of the strengths of the Kansas City defense is just how good their secondary is. And it's easy, like 2 days removed, to really replay all this stuff in your head, to go back and look at the tape and say to yourself, why did they do that? Why would they think that would work? But in the body of the game, they're calling what they think is what would be a blitz beater by offense, and they just don't execute it for whatever reason. And it's probably because of the cover guy more so than the blitzing defensive back.
Yeah, I would still rather not blitz Patrick Mahomes with his history of dealing with that.
But did you see, though, like when they got behind or San Francisco was up and now Kansas City now has time and timeouts to go down there and try to at least tie the game. I mean, now all of a sudden you're not blitzing him and he's dink, 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 dink right down the field. And great quarterbacks understand that that's the way that you do it in that situation with that much time and the timeouts. And this
is the whole point
surgical.
of having Nick Bosa and Chase Young is that you don't need to, or you shouldn't, in theory, have to be sending people all the time if they're actually doing their job.
Well, they didn't send them all the time, but here's also what happens. As the game wears on and you're going no huddle late in the game, those guys get tired.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, there's so many little aspects to it, which is what makes the game so great, and how each player is impacted by what is happening on the field in real time. And I thought they got a little tired at the end of regulation. Maybe that's also why Kyle Shanahan felt like, you know what, give me the ball. My defense needs a rest.
Yeah, this is another one of those situations where a great head coach is in the crosshairs because something that he did and his team came up short in the biggest moment, when Kyle Shanahan has been one of the best head coaches the game has had over the last number of years. And it's just unfortunate because I think that most franchises would trade their head coach for Kyle Shanahan tomorrow. But now it looked to be a fool in this situation because it looked like he didn't have his team prepared as much as Andy Reid had his team, which I think is sort of a fair criticism. But it's not like this guy is some sort of moron. He's going to have that team right back there. He was able to really get as much possible out of Brock Purdy in that situation. And as far as putting more pressure on Brock Purdy, I mean, I guess as the game goes on and it's the moments that will decide the game, there's got to be more pressure in his brain. But at the same time, I mean, this guy played an entire 4 quarters of a Super Bowl pretty calmly and pretty well.
I thought he did too, but
I mean, does it get that much different in overtime?
Well, the other thing too is to remember that Kansas City gave up 22 total points in 4 playoff games in the second half combined. Their defense got better and better and better as games went on.
Yeah.
And once Steve Spagnuolo figured out what the other team was trying to do, and then, you know he's going to blitz once you get in over the 50, he's just going to bring it. Every 3 out of 4 times he's going to blitz.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to be able to handle it. And your wide receivers have got to get open. And when you have cover corners like they have in the secondary, that is like the major advantage. I remember playing Cleveland back in the day, man. They had 2 corners, Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield, that were a pain in the ass. And they were so good at covering that, you had to make sure first and foremost that you were blocking first, and then you would go after those guys because you would need a little bit of extra time to get away from them, especially back in those days because they could hold, and they would never get called for holding. So when you have good cover guys like Kansas City has, you can take some chances defensively, and that's what happened. I mean, George Kittle really wasn't involved in this game at all.
No, barely at all. By the way, did you see Tyreek Hill's tweet during, or maybe it was like right after the game, where he said, "Why don't Spags got no interviews?" Meaning, why did Steve Spagnuolo go a whole hiring cycle without getting any interview at all?
Just maybe a better coordinator than a head coach, and he's had a chance at a head coach.
Sure. But, I mean, there's been other guys that have been recycled.
There's another guy in that staff, Matt Nagy, who was the coach for the Chicago Bears the last, 3 or 4 years, and supposedly at halftime he gave a speech like, we all got to come together here, guys. None of this, and this was in direct correlation to the Travis Kelce and Andy Reid kind of situation on the sideline.
Okay. Yeah, which, did we really ever find out what he was screaming at?
No, but I did hear Patrick Mahomes' final call to McCole Hardman. I heard the whole thing, the whole formation and everything else, and it was called Tom and Jerry, and then Peter King, I guess, sat down with Andy Reid somewhere along the line. I'm not really sure.
Peter King?
But they put it out, and Andy explained the play. And, it's an old West Coast play that, if you got a fast guy and you're kind of calling you to one side of the field, which is what they did, and the name of the play ultimately was Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry.
And that's what it was.
Tom and Jerry, fellas.
Now, NFL Films records every single sound
We'll find out
on the sideline. But this is what will they protect Travis Kelce and Andy Reid in that situation and not release that audio, or will it be out there?
I think it's going to be out there.
I disagree. I think that they're not going to play that.
You don't think so? I think Travis Kelce knows that he was mic'd and knows that he was intense. And I always tell you he's on another level of intensity. I think you got to play it. I think you got to let us hear what the hell he said. And, what's going to happen is if it's disrespectful, which it looked to be.
Well, I mean, it just his actions were whatever he said.
I mean, you got a 65-year-old head coach
that he almost knocked down.
Right. I mean, if you would have knocked him down.
Oh, my God. That would have been like Pedro Martinez and Don Zimmer.
But they're on the same team.
I know, which is even crazier.
That Pedro Don Zimmer thing was just nuts. I mean, that was. It's hard to even explain that one.
And he grabbed him by his head and threw him down. It was incredible. I mean, and I know he was charging at him, and some people were like, well, what are you supposed to do? I mean, I don't know. You don't throw the 80-year-old guy to the ground.
I mean, let's say you're standing outside, out front.
Yeah.
And some belligerent woman comes up. What do you do?
I mean, how threatening? I mean, is this woman a bodybuilder, or is she like 5'2", 110 pounds, I mean, there's all different types of women.
I mean, but do you ever think about being potentially in a situation like that?
With like a woman attacking me? And would I punch a woman?
Yeah.
I do. I know. I actually have never thought about that. I feel like instinctually I'll do what I've got to do. I mean, chances
you have the
are
instincts that you'll try to do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think
you'll probably say like, hey, just back off.
Yeah.
Give me my space.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put me in a bad situation here. She takes one step out. Pow!
Well, I mean, I think.
What would you do?
I think if I saw a weapon, maybe. But if it's just belligerent,
if you saw a weapon, you'd be running.
Well, yeah. I mean, if a weapon, you'd have to do something about it. But if it's just a woman that is just belligerent, I think I just keep moving.
To me, that whole situation that happened in the Baltimore train station. The more I think about it, the more you could see how people are just unhinged at times.
Yeah.
And are not thinking straight.
You see this guy get his eyeball ripped out of his head at a game the other day? This is a video.
A guy got his eyeball
ripped out of his head. Yeah.
Oh, and what game was this?
Hold on.
I mean, was this in the States? So this has to be some sort of European, Kazakhstani, something. What are we talking about here?
Well, I just saw it before Spike pulled me into, lame duckskin pulled me into your office.
Lame duckskin.
This was this was an old one then. This is the eyeball. This is what it was. It was an eyeball that got ripped out at the Kentucky Derby. Remember that?
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah, guy's eyeball got ripped out
at the Kentucky Derby because they were arguing over horses?
Yeah, and then Rascona sent me something yesterday, the great Brian Rascona. He was calling a high school hockey game, and a brawl broke out.
I think I saw that.
Yeah, he was calling it for LI Sports Network. It was Connecticut against Kings Park.
Oh, yeah,
And there was a full-blown brawl in the stands.
In the stands, okay.
And then parents and kids and everybody were fighting each other. It spilled outside.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm telling you, that's South Shore, man. We don't mess. We don't mess, kid.
Goodness.
You know that.
Yeah.
Kings Park's a little bit north, but, we don't mess. That's still, you would still consider them South Shore, right?
I'd have to really take a look at it, to be honest with you.
They're north of the LIE, I believe.
Yeah, let's see.
But that's our area, man. We played those high schools.
Yeah. Let's see, map. I just want to make exactly. Yeah, it has to be because they're playing. No. It's way farther north than you think.
Well, Kings Point is.
Kings Park, yeah.
Kings Park. I mean, Kings Park is on like 25 or 20. Was it 25A?
Yeah. It's up there.
Yeah,
it's even north of that.
So they consider themselves like that. It's on the way like to Stony Brook.
Yeah. Even
still the heart of Long Island.
Right. It's east of Northport.
Do you think they consider themselves North Long Island guys?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So do you think that Connecticut being the south part of Long Island, do you think that they brought the worst out in them?
I'll tell you right now, the Connecticut definitely won that fight. In my opinion.
Boy, that's what we're talking about.
I mean, I think for sure because that's like the Oakdale area. You know what I'm saying? That's just west of me. So they're definitely not messing around.
That's in between the Sunrise Highway and the LIE.
It's also between East Islip and Sayville. It's right in there.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, the Thunderbirds.
Way to go, man.
Connecticut Thunderbirds.
About it, yeah.
Quickly, Joe in New Jersey. What's going on, Joe?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
What's up, man?
No, my question is, I know you just mentioned and you were talking about Pedro with Don Zimmer. My point is, why wasn't a younger, not an 80-year-old man, the first to get to Pedro?
Well, I mean, you got to give Zimmer a lot of credit here, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, he went out there and tried to fight somebody. I mean, he just basically lost his mind.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to go back and remember these specifics. I mean, what I remember was Pedro was sort of just hanging out there as a innocent bystander in that situation, and here came Zimmer and he threw him to the ground. But I have to go back and watch it.
At the end of the day, if you're Zimmer, I mean, Pedro is not a very big guy.
No.
You got to – now, if the thing that disappointed me, like he should have thrown his whole body into Pedro.
Yeah, well, he was trying. He was trying. It's just tough.
I mean, Pedro was in a very weird situation.
This is what you're talking about, yeah.
Yes, I mean, like, I don't know. If a guy's charging at you like a Brahma bull, what do you do?
I'm not sure, but it looks so bad,
I know it looked bad.
Terrible. I mean, you grab anybody by the head and throw them to the ground. It just looks bad, especially when you're talking about the elderly.
Yeah, but the elderly shouldn't be getting themselves involved in stuff like this.
Fair point. 877.
Yeah, 877. Yeah, right. That's exactly what I thought when it happened. I'm like, what in the world? I mean, he usually just sits over there next to Joe Torre.
Yeah.
And just quietly goes about his business.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, something snapped in him, and he just bounced off the bench and said, "You know what? I'm going to go get me some."
And that was sort of the way we felt about Travis Kelce and Andy Reid. Young person.
But they're on the same team.
Young person, older guy.
But they're on the same team.
I know. That's what makes it even crazier.
You got to be kidding me.
All right, Boomer and Gio on the Fan and CBS Sports Network. We've got Jerry Recco joining us in just a couple of minutes with an update on this cold February Wednesday morning on the Fan. All right.